Smoke signals from around the campfire.
Thank you. I'm noticing quite a nice turnout of men today. Look,
Yes.
Brian, Graham, Conrad, Ken, Gian, Pete, Simon. I mean, that's what, how many?
We're
6.
almost in the majority here. I think there's somebody
6.
anonymous who's phoned in on 447757. Not sure who that is. If you're on that number, maybe you could just say hello.
Poppy says, what about a man leading?
Yeah, it's a good point. Any men would like to lead on this? Simon, Conrad, Graham, Jan?
Haven't seen Jan before. Hi,
Hello,
Jan.
Jan. Yeah, greetings, Jan.
I
Hillside.
can lead.
Quick
I
read
can
of
lead.
Maria's
Good morning,
comments,
people.
just so getting that background of what she's talking about. Apparently, as we get older, we get grumpier, whereas women don't. So that's
Men do,
Men.
yeah,
Yeah.
apparently.
Well, before we go on to that topic, I'd like to invite the usual check-in, but I'd like to ask that you just limit it very quickly because there are quite a few of us and there's a lot to talk about on this exciting topic. So could I say a minute maximum? Would everyone be happy with that? Anyone not?
I have a suggestion, Pete, to how to limit it. Because,
Fire
you know,
away.
once you start, it's like all the stuff that's happening. So just name a feeling
Yeah.
and name something interesting you found this week. I mean, you know, just
Yeah.
off the top of your head and keep it to
What is
that.
happening to you right now? How are you feeling? And one thing of interest this week, and please no more than a minute if possible. So we'll do the usual talking stick style. If somebody would like to go first and lead the way, and then nominate somebody else to follow. Any takers for the first? Ken, good to see
I'll
you.
be the usual first victim. Okay, those of us who are interested in the music scene, there is some very disconcerting news. Bandcamp has been sold to a gamer
Sorry,
company.
can I stop you there? This is about how you're feeling right now and one thing that you've done this week. So I don't know if you heard that. That was the suggestion for how we check in. So not really news on Bandcamp. It's more about how you're feeling, if that's okay.
I'm upset about that. And the week, as usual, has been filled with weirdness. I don't think that's going to end. But I think this kind of ties in with the whole theme. Can you see the title of that?
Yeah.
And I have a lot, and I'm still working on trying to get a therapist, and that has not been easy. I'm in contact with the agency that's trying to get me one. But the new insurance company, United Healthcare, in other words, insurance companies over here may also be able to help with that. So we'll see where that goes. Meanwhile, life continues to be very weird, and I don't see any sign that that is going to lessen or mitigate. I guess that's my minute. I could blather on, as you all know.
Thank you. Would you like to nominate the next person, please?
All right, Pete, why don't you go? You don't usually get to go very early in these things.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm feeling a mixture of nourishment, exhaustion, exhilaration, and repose. So I'm on Paros. We did our retreat, which finished last weekend. I'm starting to process all the amazing experiences that came out of that and people's reactions and people's connections, and they're bonding through it. I've also got some new house guests that arrived yesterday, so I've had to put time into welcoming them. So I've had a couple of days off to myself and realized how much I treasure that time alone to begin to process all the emotion and stuff that's coming up. I also started the Artist's Way course with Matt Coldrick this week, which has had a wonderful effect on me already. I'm journaling it with morning pages every day, and that's changed everything for me, how I'm feeling into stuff and how I'm feeling into myself. So that's probably my...
Does he assign you readings?
Sorry, can we just do check-ins and then we can ask questions about people's check-ins afterwards? I'd like to have a separate chat with you about the Artist's Way anyway, later at the end of the session maybe. So I'd like to nominate Diane. How did it go last week?
Last week was very quiet, just 3 of us. It was a pleasant chat. We got to meander a bit around some of Ken's collection of all sorts of stuff. And came up with an idea for one of these Sunday mornings sometime as a topic. Everybody bring a book that they value, treasure, whatever. Because I shared one of the books last week that I really love, and thought it'd be an idea for a topic. Anyway, how am I this week? Feeling behind because I wasn't 100% last week for a few days, and going away next weekend, and I'm not ready in any way, shape or form for that, but that's fine. I know it'll all come together, but I'm just behind with everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will nominate Nicola. I don't think I've met you, Nicola.
No, we haven't met. Hi, Diane. Yeah, interesting point that Ken made, feeling weird. I think that kind of is often what men say, weird or funny. Yeah, so I think that's quite a good thing to bring into the session. I'm feeling really uplifted. It was really nice hearing that music to start with because I felt instantly connected. That was the music we danced to at Camp Out, so it's really special to me, and on the beach. So it's amazing how music is associated to memories, isn't it? And takes us back to a place. Yeah, feeling the connection. I guess it's sort of probably about new pathways for me this week. There's quite a lot of things coming my way, and I guess it's about being discerning and deciding which path to take, you know, which feels right at the moment. I have signed up for the Artist Way because I feel like sometimes you just need to jump on it when it's there, and there are quite a few people doing it that I was with. I've just come back from the retreat as well, just to put you in the picture. And there's quite a few people doing it that were on the retreat. So I think that would be nice to support one another, continue that connection. And I guess for me, it's about adjustment. Coming back from being in a community has been good and bad. And there's that sense of great, got my own space, can do what I like. And then there's that loss, you know, there's that feeling of, God, I miss walking out onto the balcony and chatting to my mates next door and having a, you know, sneaky gin at the end of the night. So it's kind of that ambivalence, which always comes up with me in my life, ambivalence. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's probably longer than a minute.
You're about 20 seconds over, I think.
Oh, that's not bad then.
Not that I'm holding a stopwatch or anything, but I could. Would you like to nominate somebody else?
I'll nominate Tamara.
Hi, thank you, Nicola. Yes, I just got up at 5 this morning to drive my daughter and my youngest of 8 grandchildren, no, second youngest granddaughter, to Luton Airport to catch their flight back to Israel, where they live. And I'm moving house probably within 6 weeks. So I was fully expecting them during their 3-week stay with me to help sort stuff out, to fetch and carry, to take their stuff out of the house, leave me a bit more space. But instead they had a holiday in London and they were out every day and eating and spending money and having a great time. And I'm feeling fucking exhausted and somewhat disappointed, but also I love them so dearly, I can't really start a row. So I'm buttoning my left lip with them. So something of interest this week, I've got in front of me the final form, because I've also bought a house. Well, I had an offer accepted, and this is the questionnaire that I have to fulfill about my money for the purchase of the house. So I think this, hopefully, fingers crossed, I've been answering for the last several weeks tedious questions about legalities of permissions and things dating back to the previous last century, 1870, where the house I'm buying was built. And I'm coming to the end of that, hopefully, and maybe things will just jump off this week. So I'm hopeful now. And I love the Artist's Way that I did many years ago, and a live workshop with Julia Cameron at Cecil Sharp House, the home of British folk, English folk, sorry, as you may know it. So I'll pass it on to Simon. There's some muted, Simon.
Okay, so I was just struggling with the controls. Morning, everyone. Yeah, what was arising me for this week? I was realizing how much happier I am when I get things organized. I'm not a sort of list maker or that sort of thing, or a lover of spreadsheets or anything like that. It's just that I just noticed I was feeling much better when things I planned actually got finished and ready for the next stage of whatever I'm doing. So so I'm feeling a bit happy about that now. So yeah, I think that's one thing I've noticed is I don't enjoy uncertainty. Not that that's in itself, uncertainty is necessarily a bad thing, but that's where I am really. Enjoying the late autumn weather. It's been actually quite dry and managed to get out and do stuff. Looking forward this week to just not having to do any tasks. Who else? I haven't seen people I haven't seen before. Poppy, hello Poppy. I'll nominate you.
Thank you. Hi. Can't decide whether to have glasses on or not. If I'm here, it's okay. Oh, I'm cooking at the moment, and the beeper's just going off. I'm a little bit like I'm trying to be present, but I'm with the oven. Oh, a little bit anxious. I feel a bit anxious. Yeah, I will see what that's about. And I've had a bit like you, Pete, I haven't had time to process I just got back on Tuesday from a 6-day family constellations module that I work on. And then that was Tuesday, I got back. Wednesday morning, I went to see my horse. And in the afternoon, I went to the UK passport office to pick up my lovely new blue passport. And then Thursday morning, I flew to Cork, and I'm now in West Cork cooking for a retreat. So it's just, and I thought, oh, cooking will be fine. I can take time and process everything that happened on the module. And I literally have had like 1 hour and I just fell asleep because I was so knackered. So yeah, that's probably the anxiety, actually. That's where the lack of sleep causes anxiety. So that's me. I'm just going to go and deal with the brownies in the oven. And I am listening, but I'm hearing that. Thank you.
Do you like to nominate somebody, Poppy? Thank you. Good luck with the brownies.
Good idea, yeah. I will nominate Conrad.
Good morning, all. I'm nervous. I've been working on what I've called my cowardice for months, really, but realized now that I must step up, and I am beginning to step up in so much as I'm now doing a session every month called Conversations with Conrad. This is around natural law, but I also spell law L-O-R-E, because I think that is the real law, however you want to see it. So Conversations with Conrad, I've just been told that apparently I'm going to be with Sandy Adams in November. Someone is arranging. So the nervous scale is going up a bit. Anyway, so that's where I'm at. I'm learning to step up to speak, to tell my stories, to combine them together with what I call natural law, L-O-R-E, stroke law, and so that's basically where I'm at the moment. Thank you. I nominate Graham, who I'm glad to see.
Thank you, Conrad. Good morning. I am feeling excited. I'm going to put the word excited on it. I woke up feeling nervous and I examined my mind and decided I seem to be facing a single core negative truth in my life, and it's manifesting as a feeling in my body. But my heart is beating. And I'm glad to be here. A thing of interest this week, just the connection of ideas. I woke up and wrote a couple of lines along the idea of the artist's way, and I've been sketching again. I'm fascinated with perspective, but I'll leave it there. Thank you. Good to see you people. Oh, I got to nominate somebody. Next is Jan Erik Hoss, hillsidemassage.uk. Good morning, Jan.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Well, I'm sort of very loosely following you guys. A little uncommitted. I'm very curious about what's happening here. I just looked into this link someone sent it, set in the chat about sexism. In general, I'm a living man, so I'm very curious in all these issues regarding man. And I'm having a lovely weekend here in Somerset. I'm in Glasgow with my
We seem to have lost you, Jan. I'm not sure if you're near your modem, maybe.
yeah, my connection is rubbish in the living room, I think.
If not, switch off your camera.
I'll try that.
You'll have a better reception.
So, is that any better, possibly? Shows a younger image of myself. I'm rather interested in listening at the moment. So I'll see where this takes me. I'm speaking enough in this lifetime, so you will hear me when I need something to say. So thank you for having me, and thank you, Peter, for all your efforts. I missed your festival this summer, but I'll be there at some point.
Thank you, Jan.
And I nominate. I can't see anybody, so if you give me a hand here, that would be amazing. Who to nominate? Thank you.
Okay, I'll nominate Katerina Kitsili from Paros. If she can hear us loud and clear. She's not on video.
Hello, guys. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Because it's the usual thing. It's windy here and Paros, of course. Still trying to steal out some summer moments, as is officially like beginning of fall today. And I feel it's like being in a transition from one season to the other, and an internal transition as well, not only from summer to fall, but being curious about the next phase and what the coming months are bringing in, or what I would be contributing into the coming months. It was an interesting week. I feel very curious about our discussion and examining the subject. I came across the Everyday Sexism project that I was not aware of. And my contribution is like how to bridge these gap, how to bridge this chasm between the sexes, or whatever the nuances of sexes might be, because it's a crucial and a vital, fact of life that and society, that we need to get along together and like hand in hand, and not just stay in the negative nuances of it and the conflicting aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. Would you like to pass on? We have
Who hasn't talked yet?
you have
Nicola?
a choice of Brian or Clifford, who's just joined us. Good to see you, Clifford.
Clifford, thank you.
Apologies to everybody for arriving late. I thought on a Sunday morning I had plenty of time, and then one thing after another, and suddenly it's, yeah, I'm late again. I've also I missed the focus of the beginning of this. I'll just introduce myself a little around gender and male. And for me, this last year or two, it's been about intimacy and seeking to be intimate with other people. And how I'm intimate with men is very, very different from how I'm intimate with women. And discovering that in those interactions, just discovering how deeply that runs and how wounded it runs and how painful it is to touch someone deeply and discover how hurt they are and to be touched. And yeah, for me, there's so much buried pain that surfaces in all sorts of twisted and distorted ways, individually and in our culture. For me, it's how do we give space for that and hold it gently? And a lot of that is around the violence between men and women in all sorts of subtle ways. I mean, obviously, it's physical in some cases, in a way that is deeply oppressive. But also in my everyday interactions, I discover lots of ways in which I'm defending myself and stabbing at people, and other people are defending themselves and stabbing at me. And often I live in a way that's defended, but I hardly notice it. And I feel really sad at that ignorance I live in. And as I seek to notice it, it's like how to discover enough to respond to it and not be overwhelmed by just so much. So for me, it's about learning to gently with myself and with others, become more sensitive to what's barely visible sometimes, but so important because it drives so much of our behaviors. And the other bit is I live with other people. And I still don't know how I do that. So I'm in a room where someone's like to open the door at any point and come in and look and say, oh, it's you, and walk out again. Or they might walk in and say, oh, it's you, and start talking to me. And when it happens every day, many times a day, it's quite disorientating. And it also seems mostly the point of it as well. Yeah, how to recognize other people and have a real conversation each time. I think I'll leave it there for openers, and curious to hear what else people have to say. And apologies in advance if I am interrupted and I choose flesh people over the computer screen.
Thank you,
Because I arrived late, I have no idea who else has not yet spoken.
We have two, Brian, and then somebody else who's anonymous with a phone number. So, Brian, would you like to go first? Then we can invite the anonymous.
That's Diane on her phone.
Ah.
Okay, well, it's been an eventful week. When I say week, I mean the 3 days when I'm not working and sleeping. My work pattern at the moment is to work 4 long days of and commuting to Reading. Then sort of basically a 3-day weekend, which has been eventful. Certainly hasn't been dull. On Friday, I managed to sustain a puncture on the smart motorway with no hard shoulder, which was a slightly scary experience basically tried to change the tire in one of the refuge areas and eventually thought better of it and got the RAC out. What else have I've built? Well, what I call the hippie crack prism. One of the things that I do is weld up old discarded nitrous oxide bottles, and I'll post some pictures of it up in the the Campfire website of which is see if anybody's interested. What else? I've started the Shape Up for Life course, which is sort of a free course just aimed at weight loss. Because I'm sitting around and at work and not cycling as much as I used to. So my weight has, surprise, ballooned up to about 17 stone, which isn't good. Hopefully get some of that off. Just to bring to the discussion about what is the role of men. My sort of position would be, I'm a human being. I happen to be male. So it's just with this. So that's just what I would bring to any discussion about gender roles. Let's see how things progress. And maybe pass on to 44757 538
Tamara, did you say that as Diane's second connection? So yeah, we don't need to pass on to the mysterious number. So yeah, I was slightly thrown because I was expecting Maria to lead this conversation. So I said at the beginning, suggested at the beginning, I'm offering for somebody else to step up and lead it, or perhaps we can co-lead it with anyone else. Tamara stuck her hand up and said I would lead it, and then somebody else suggested maybe a man should lead it. So I don't know how people are feeling on this, or whether anyone is happy to join with me and co-lead it. Can we have a raising of hands if anyone here is interested in co-leading it? Tamara's hand's gone up.
Well, I don't, I'm always up for leading things, so I don't mind either way, Pete, if you want to co-lead or lead or do it yourself, or, whatever. Doesn't require special skill.
Thank you, Tamara. I would also be interested in, Cliff mentioned an event, you were doing a session out this summer at another festival on our thread, so I'd be interested in hearing more about that. I think it might be useful. I've been writing down words, both in terms of how do men feel and how do men want to feel. So if anyone feels inclined to jot down words or phrases that maybe help focus this conversation, I'll throw a few out here. So some of the things that people have been talking about in terms of how they want to feel, or maybe identify with how some men are feeling, but are perhaps reluctant to move into that space, are vulnerable, sensitive, open, indecisive, emergent, surrender, fragile, emotional, intimacy. Those are some of the words that have cropped up. And then in terms of some of the conversations I've been having recently with some male friends, some quite interesting reactions actually to the idea of coming into circle as part of a retreat. And two of my best friends, very interesting reactions. One of them said, I can't do all the hippie shit, which was a very interesting way of perhaps typecasting their conception of what goes on when men and women are in circle and opening up. And the other one said, the spiritual atmosphere isn't for me. A person here who's happy to go hill walking and drink pints of beer. So, yeah, are those issues in terms of how we bring men together to perhaps be a bit more open and a bit more sensitive and vulnerable? I'm just throwing a few questions out there. And to go back to the agenda that Maria came up with as a possible framework for this discussion, men in self-development, men understanding, valuing, and actually doing inner work. I'd be interested, Tamara, for you to talk a little. You've talked on past sessions about inner work. Men having adequate emotional and mental support for this, presuming for this being the inner work they're doing. men in community, men leading the effort in building strong, healthy relationships in their lives, which very much resonates with what Cliff was saying in particular. Would anyone like to pick up on any of those points and move into a conversation? Please raise a digital hand if possible. Ken?
Yeah, as some of you know, because you see me like this, I am born male, but I have a certain predilection for cross-dressing, if you can see that. And I have to say that Pete's electronic music, I would love to shake pom-poms to it. Anyway, I suspect that my cross-dressing thing gives me maybe a unique perspective on this. I am not a transsexual. There is no surgery or any of that going on, but I sort of play in both camps. And it would have been surprisingly appropriate for me to have dressed that way today, although it takes a lot of preparation. And I'm, if there's an event to go to, and I think about doing that, it adds another element. And if I just want to enjoy the event, maybe I should not do that. And I guess it's, my relationship with cross-dressing and all does speak to vulnerability. And I don't know. I mean, I have to find women who can accept that I do that. And I hope it's not too, off-putting. It's not standard. It's not, I doubt that I'll give it up. I can reduce it, but I doubt that I'll ever give it up completely, because it does give me some kind of, repose isn't the right word. I read somewhere, I looked up causes of cross-dressing, and somebody said it may have something to do with the parent you're related to best. And in my case, that's a real easy one. My father had a temper. My mother was the nice one. I don't think my sister and I were raised very well, but now I'm 71. I can't do too much about that. But yeah, my mother was the nice one. So maybe that is something of an explanation. My sister and I were both verbally abused. My father had a temper, I appreciate you all listening to this. But yeah, I really would have liked to shake pom-poms to the electronic music. I didn't realize that would be so much fun. And that is kind of what I look like when I do it. If you can see this, can you see it?
No, it's a bit too close to the...
Oh, should I do that?
Take it away from the camera.
Yeah, you're down too low now, so we can't see what you're doing.
Is that better?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a bit.
Can't- you can't
Raise
see
it up a bit, Ken.
Hold it up.
Up?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Now you can see it. All right. And I've got some music stuff to report on. I'll save that for the end. But yeah, it's dealing with the cross-dressing thing is, I'm wondering if I should reduce that even further, because if I go to an event, maybe just going to the event is the important thing, and stressing over what I look like should not be so important. How this affects my relationships, friendships with other people, I don't really know. I mean, do you guys mind if I ask you all how you feel about it? Is it alienating? Are you comfortable with it? Do you find it weird? Do you want an explanation? More of an explanation?
What about cross-dressing?
I might ask one question. When you're cross-dressing, how do you talk to your male friends about it, and how do they respond?
I never thought about that. One of the weird things that happened is men will ask me to dance, and I am not sure if I can deal with that. It's happened a few times. I didn't think I looked well. I don't know. Maybe I look better than I think I do. I don't know. You all have seen it. Some of you have seen it.
Thank you for sharing that. We'd like, if anyone would like to come back to Ken after we've moved around a little, that would be great. Nicola, you had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. Right. Yeah, it was just picking up on your point about the friends that had responded and said hippie shit, spiritual atmosphere, not for me. My first thought with that is that it's fear-based. so their reaction is coming from a place of fear. And I think it's about reframing it, you know, it's about their perception. So they're expecting this hippie shit spiritual atmosphere. I think it's about sort of making it, I know we've discussed this, about making it sort of appear to them that it's not actually going to be hippie shit, and it's not necessarily going to be all spiritual, happy clappy, being in a circle, because I think some men feel intimidated by being in a circle. So maybe doing an activity, you know, bushcraft, something that allows them to sort of think that it's not emotional based, because I think a lot of men are quite afraid of being vulnerable and, you know, disclosing their emotions. So it's about reframing it, I think, and actually bringing the emotional bit in, but bringing it in a very subtle way, maybe towards the end of an activity when, you know, they've actually started to bond a little bit. So
Yeah.
that's my kind of thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that very much resonates. So maybe cheers at the end of the archery class is the way to go. But yeah, some other words that have cropped up. Weird was one that Ken raised. Cowardice as well was already brought up in the session. I was talking to my new house guests actually about this subject this morning, and some of the expressions that came up around men were wounded, buttoned up, in denial, self-contained, skeptical, cynical, stiff upper lip, constricted, showing weakness, apathetic or helpless, which I know was a couple of phrases that Tamara used in the chat on Campfire as well. I'd be interested in asking her for that experience in a minute, but more hands up. Simon.
Yeah, I think for me, we seem to, society in general, a lot of people don't seem to really know what men's role should be. Should they have a specific, if you like, framework to work in? I mean, it seems to me we're on the one hand, where I work at the retreat centre, we had this issue where we have groups of children in with doing school groups or whatever, and there's this, oh my God, stranger danger, we can't have people just wandering in, staff like me, because that could be, you know, are there safe spaces to disappear into, and we all had to have our enhanced DBS clearance sorted and all this sort of stuff. And so there's this perception of men being intrinsically dangerous in one extreme. There's also there's recent issues with, yeah, we talk about misogyny, don't we? But nobody talks about misandry, which is its counterpart. So for me, I think maybe a better, people need a better idea of what they think men should be doing. I'm not saying we should have some sort of straitjacketed role that says, you know, you've got to do this and do that. But it seems to me there's a paradox here between the hunter-gatherer model, where we should be going out with a spear and bringing back chunks of mammoth to throw on the fire, and the other one to being totally caring and looking after children and not being assertive. And yet, looking at that list that Maria put down there, men in community, men leading the effort in building strong, healthy relationships in their lives. You've got to have this sort of, you've got to be a leader and then not be aggressive or self-centered. Seems to me there's lots of different sort of pigeonholes that we've all got to fit into at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know if anyone has solutions or typecast suggestions, but thank you, Simon. Poppy.
Hi. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I really hear what you're saying, Simon, and I think you know, speaking as a woman, obviously, I think there's so many issues with this. Someone mentioned the nitrous oxide, Brian. You know, well, I went to Notting Hill Carnival this year, and I went on the Monday, which I don't normally do. I normally just go on a Sunday. For years, I've only gone on Sunday. Monday was so different. There was like twice as many people, and a lot of young men, and a lot of them walking around taking nitrous oxide out of balloons, and it was incredibly upsetting. I found it really upsetting, especially as when I was caught in a crowd, you know, in a crush, a man tried to hold my neck. And I said, like, get off. And then everyone told me to chill out. and then I got felt up, which I kind of expect in a crush. But by then I was like, the guy just tried to hold my neck, like, what the hell? And then another guy came past and I just he was going really fast through the crush. So I just latched onto him and got out of the crush, which was great. And he was really nice and really took care to see that I was all right and why was I on my own and da-da-da-da. And then I walked to the station, the other station, and there were two boys doing the nitrous oxide and they're just walking along, inhaled their balloons and then just into a parked car. And I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing here? This is just awful. It's like, it really depressed me. And I just think that, you know, patriarchy has caused a crisis in women and men. And we live in this society. It's so reached its peak. I think of like the Aztec Empire just before it crashes, you know, or the Roman Empire or whatever. We're at the sort of pinnacle, the high point, and it's all about to go with peak oil and all the rest of it. I've got so much to say, I don't know where to stop. The other thing is, you know, where else does this trauma in men in particular come from? And I, you know, from my work, I'm a family constellations facilitator, it's from the war. So, you know, the men and the women's parents, the people here, parents or grandparents, went off to war. And then they had to come back. The men had to come back and pretend that everything was fine. But they'd just been in situations where their comrades had been killed beside them and where they'd had to kill themselves. And I think that's a hugely traumatic thing and has a massive impact on, well, I know it has a massive impact on a family system. And then the trauma is carried by the young men or the men who follow on from that. So yeah, I feel a bit desperate and down about it. And also someone on the chat was talking about, was it Matt? He said where all men were. So they're like doing the battle scenes and appreciating art. And I went to a life drawing class. I started going to a life drawing class, not a class, a drop-in. And it's full of men. There's like only me and 2 other women and then 9 men. I was like, oh, this is where the men are. I don't know why that is. Life drawing is a man thing, it seems. And everything else I do is hippie shit, but like that doesn't stop. I don't think men are excluded from hippie shit. In fact, I went for a meal with the guy from Marketing for Hippies, who is a man and does marketing for hippies. So that was recently. I realized there are quite a lot of men who are into hippie shit, and there were loads of hippie men as well, of course, and ones who organize festivals and things like that. And then what's the other thing I wanted to say? Oh, God. There's just so much. I think I've probably spoken enough. Thanks.
Thank you, Poppy. Yeah, do come back if you remember what the other thing was. Interestingly, the guy that did term the hippie shit looks like an archetypal hippie, actually, with a bobble hat and smoke, never short of a joint or two in his hand or his mouth. Yeah, Matt on the thread mentioned, as well as your reference to life drawing, he mentioned rugby club, yacht club, martial arts, model building, hang gliding, windsurfers, growers, gardeners, divers, and all sorts of stuff, as well as people who like in Paros to eat saganaki and drink local wines, which would probably include me, actually. Tamara, did you want to come in at this point and guide the conversation for a period?
Well, yes, I would love to. Thank you, Pete. I've been jotting down sort of thoughts and notes and, picking up quite a number of points here. What I've been thinking for years already is that post-war, I think, the Industrial Revolution killed the relationship between men and women and families, because men were separated from their families to go and work in cities or factories somewhere away from home. And also the marine trade, where men would be away for years at a time on ships at the other side of the world, and families were expected to just carry on, and the women carried on. From what I don't know, I'm sure that's not true worldwide, but certainly for the Western world, and the conquering nations, if you like, the explorers and invaders. So then they came home with different expectations as well, but they were estranged from their traditions and families too. So pretty traumatic, the Industrial Revolution. And then we had the 2 world wars, in which men, mostly men, were extraordinarily traumatized. I mean, you know, if you've ever read there's a song by a book by Sebastian Faulks, To Know What It's Like was like in the trenches of the Somme, a bird song, I think it's called, and it's the only thing that really brought home to me what it would be like, have been like, with your feet rotting and your companions blown to pieces, and seeing an arm that belonged to your friend in the mud right next to your face. I mean, you know, such trauma we cannot even begin to imagine. And coming home from that sort of experience, expected to be, you know, be nice to the kids and kind to the wife and go to work and put your uniform on and button up your tie and button your lip, I think was incredibly stressful on top of all the trauma. And so a lot of men began to drink. At least my 2 uncles were at Dunkirk, you know, very young men at Dunkirk on the beaches, with the threat of being overwhelmed within minutes. That was traumatic for them, and they were both drinkers and died age 47 and 45. You know, so men have had a very hard time. But I mean, that's all background. You probably all know most of that anyway. But I think what happened was that expectations changed dramatically from traditional expectations, like men the breadwinner, women at home, baking and cooking, Kinderkuchen, Kirche, you know, all of that stuff. That changed radically after the war. And we're still kind of recovering from that. I mean, I was born the year before the war started, and so I've experience of, and I was quite aware, and I'm still quite aware and awake. You know, the farmers, I lived in a very rural area, and the farmers down the road they were all very traditional, and you know, the men did the heavy work, the women did the heavy work at home, you know, so, and everybody pitched in, and it was more equal, I think, actually, more shared tasks and feelings, and I'm sure they all talked to each other about their feelings in private. And the couple down the road, the old Thompson couple, I mean, there were several levels of Thompson family, but the old couple, and they lived as if they'd lived 100 years previously. So I had direct experience of people living like 200 years before my present era. They would hand in hand go down to a cabin in the field where there was a bench with 2 holes in, and they'd sit together on the toilet every day. You know, it's like, what could be more intimate than that, really? Sharing those things, you know, no embarrassment, no restriction between you. So that my background thoughts. And then I think men have been struggling and confused and quite frightened by the shift initiated in the 70s by the women's liberation movement, and the empowerment, horrible word, but the empowerment of women and the self-confidence of women. And men are like, well, what's the point of me, in a way? I think many men have thought, well, what's the point of being a man? You know, also, I think the proportions have been, the proportions of men to women have a direct impact on how we relate. And we're now expected to have an equal population, a man and a woman couple, you know, that's the society in order as they want it. But it used to be that there were far fewer men, because boy babies didn't survive very often, and men were killed going off to fight and forage and all of that stuff. And now there are more women, more men, population-wise, than there ever have been, I think, in the Western world. But I think women's expectations of men have changed, and men's expectations of women have changed, and none of us are quite able to articulate what they are. And I had a direct experience with 2 or 3 of the men who were on this call, or actually 4 or 5 of the men were on Campfire, or 6 of you even. And there was lovely sharing and equality and things. And then I had a bit of a struggle getting my tent in order, and 3 of the men stepped forward to help me, and I just felt that was so beautiful that 2 of the men tried terribly hard and failed to. No, it wasn't my tent. It was a tiny tent. We couldn't fold it up into its bag. I couldn't, and my hands weren't strong enough. And three men tried, and the 3rd man succeeded. And I was cheering, because it was just, he persisted and he persisted until he made it happen. We both jumped with joy. It was like, and I had asked for help, which I don't very often do. I'm learning to ask for help more often. That's another thing, So the ending of patriarchy is very confusing for men, and men are now challenged to be men. And I have 4 young men who I have huge hope for humanity, in the way that my 4 young grandsons, the oldest is now 27, he's quite mentally unstable, but the rest of them are very solid, and they're beautiful young men. They are absolutely stunning in terms of their values, their relationships. And I noticed, especially in Greece, not so much here, but especially in Greece, the boys and the girls all get along together. It seems they walk together, they play games together, they talk together, and they still have their boys and their girls groups, but they seem to like each other. And a lot of the younger men in Greece seem to want to relate to me in a lovely, kind and open and loving way. It's like extraordinary, and I love being there because of that, and just being appreciated for being a person. And yeah, so I think men have an opportunity now, and I'm so happy to see all the men here today. At the age most of you are at the moment, you are looking at this big change that we've been talking about, and living with that, and doing amazingly well. And I think the campfire setting was wonderful for the men and women to relate together, because there was no judgment, very little judgment going on at all. And when men feel judged, they get fearful, and they begin to feel inadequate or confused, and that makes people frightened and defensive. The 2 processes I would love to initiate at some point, which would have to be in person, maybe at the next campfire. One is a Carl Rogers fishbowl, where I don't know if any of you have experienced a fishbowl. If you have, kind of wave a hand, because it's an extraordinary process. Clifford, yes. So what you have first is one group, whatever the theme is, like men and women, or different races, or different ages, or different opinions, or whatever it is. One is that, so the first group sit together in the fishbowl. It's circular, and they have a conversation between themselves. So the men talk together openly about their feelings, or the women, whoever goes first, and you simply listen and witness it, and watch and observe and notice what comes up in you. And then the women, I said second to go, they swap, and the women do the same, but not as a response to what the men have shared. So that's the tricky bit. You have to facilitate that being not colored too much by what, of course it will be. And that's an amazing process. And the other one is, and then the sort of general opening up of what that felt like, and sharing in pairs and threesomes, and with your small group, and then openly with the whole group. And that can be a large group or a small group. It takes forever though, because everybody wants to speak. And once one person speaks, and the momentum gathers. It might sound a bit daunting, but it's an amazing process. So Cliff, you said you'd experienced that. I found it amazing to do and to facilitate. The other is an Arnold Mindale process, where people of opposing views or opposing opinions face each other in ranks, like closed rank, and they yell at each other, or shout at each other, or plead, or beg, or they do openly express their feelings towards the other group, and as vociferously and as violently or strongly as possible. And that is just some magic, because then you get the yin yang process, where it lights up a spark within the other person hearing you. Once they hear you, if you hear the other person, then they ask you to switch roles and represent the other role as strongly as you can. And this is just amazing. And for me, it all sums up with, how am I that? How do I do that?
Yeah.
And yeah. So There we go. So Carl Rogers, unconditional love and active listening are both essential. And the other thing I wrote on the back of something here was listen to the children. You know, you are almost, you're fully formed almost, and you have to change now if you want to. It's difficult, but the children are the future men, boys and girls are the future adults, and we need to really be careful how we raise them now, because it could be horrible or it could be wonderful.
Thank you, Tamara. So much of this is about self-awareness, isn't it? And deep listening and really being aware of what the other person is truly saying, as we've talked about many times on our sessions. Got a few hands up here, so we'll keep it moving. Katerina.
Yes, please. If I may, Tamara, in a nutshell, this is described as patriarchy since the Homeric times. Like, this is the traditional, ever known pattern that we have. The man is a warrior, the traveler, Agamemnon, Ulysses, the one who goes out to discover the world or destroy the world. And the women are back home, Penelope's waiting or running the home affairs as good as they can. And we haven't even slightly, with the Industrial Revolution, somehow it has shifted, this paradigm has shifted, but we haven't gone, like 180 degrees turn around this situation, or we haven't found a new balance yet, obviously. Otherwise, we wouldn't be discussing it right now. So on broad terms, we need to reinvent ourselves, both male and females, and come up with some more creative relationship, kinder, more kindness, more solidarity, as you mentioned with the tent, the incident. Like, go back to basics: love, kindness, solidarity, and not labeling, not divide and rule. That we are the subject of some divisions, and somebody else rules on us without even, being aware of that. That we spend our time and our lifetime in engaging in conflict, and the husband, the ex-husband, the wife, the whatever, and we can't really live in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. Diane.
Your phone.
You're muted.
Phone's muted. Phone's muted, Diane. Yeah, it's showing up as muted. I'll ask you to unmute. No, I can't.
You're unmuted now on the phone.
Oh yeah, speak.
We can't hear you. Whatever you had setting-wise earlier on worked. So.
No, we can't hear you.
Oh, it's the same old problem, Diane, isn't it? It keeps happening. What was it you did last time?
Try putting the volume up on your mic.
Okay, you're on. Well, you
Am
were
I
on
on
for a
now?
moment. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, I've no idea then, because anyway, never mind, doesn't matter. Okay, as per usual, masses of thoughts flowing through my head. So before we started this morning, I was thinking, so I have a huge interest. I have one child on this earth plane. He's a male, and he's in his 40s, and I have a grandson and a granddaughter who are twins, and who unusually, when they were in utero, were upright, because most twins, I don't know if you know, are one's above, one's below in utero, but those two were upright. And I just thought, what a wonderful metaphor for the world and going forwards and being in balance, that everybody's in balance. So I just get fascinated, and I won't go on about them because I can talk for hours about my grandchildren. But this whole thing about watching my son grow up through the 80s, 90s, etc., and kind of how he was trying to find his way. And in some ways, he's quite an old-fashioned chap, despite having weird parents that he had. It's interesting to me. And clearly, there's a whole lot of other things that he kind of got from stuff. I agree with Simon. I think the world is so confusing in the way it has expectations of the males to do this, to do that, not do this, not do that. What are people supposed to do with that? I remember being in London and a young chap offering to carry my bag up the stairs because I was struggling one day on the tube. And I was really grateful to him, but he approached it very warily because he clearly wasn't sure whether it was okay. But I remember back in the 80s, going back to what you were saying tomorrow there about 1970s and feminist movement and all of that. In the 80s, I was shocked. In 1982, I came across somebody who was into Scum, which, for those of you who've never heard of it, was the Society for Cutting Up Men, which was quite a sort of fairly extreme movement, as it were. And I was just like, that doesn't resonate for me. That's not me. So I decided I was a 1980s feminist, whatever that meant. But it certainly wasn't anything to do with Scum. So I think there are lots of things here, but one of the keys for me is about respect, and it's about everybody respecting, first of all, themselves, because most people don't respect themselves for all sorts of reasons, because then that makes it easy to respect other people, and that applies across all sorts of things. But this fundamental thing of 50%, male, 50% female, approximately, of the population, it is, it's just huge, about respect, and that's about love as well, of course, because it's about love and compassion, is what it comes down to. So I'm wandering around in my thoughts, and I'm just very conscious of the fact that a lot of women have done a lot of speaking. So I'm curious to hear more from more of the men here. So I'll stop now. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And Ken has his hand up, so straight away we'll hear more from the men.
All right. Well, Brian asked me, why do I call myself the hippie cheerleader? And I would say that's two cultural expressions that did not meet when I was younger. As far as the overall topic is concerned, this is really intense, and I think we've got to have more sessions about it. And I have to wonder, considering the topic, what the reactions would have been had I appeared cross-dressed as hippie cheerleader today. And in general, and not only do I cross-dress, but I don't do a lot of the expected male stuff. I'm not good with mechanical things, but I was never good at sports. I'm not technical. I don't repair things. And I get the impression that most men are expected to be pretty fluent with that kind of thing. And I'm absolutely not. And so that, causes doubts and questions and weirdness. I like some of these other comments were really interesting. We need to reinvent ourselves with kindness. Like I said, my sister and I were abused by my father. He had a temper. I still have not gotten over that. It's bloody obvious. A lot, unconditional love. Somebody talked about active listening. Yes, I take notes. Here's the notebook. We need to reinvent ourselves with more kindness, somebody said. Solidarity and back to basics and not rules and divisions. We really need to live in peace. I don't know how to accomplish that.
Well, you can help. We can help, Ken.
I know. That's why I keep coming here every weekend.
I know. Yeah.
And
I'll do another session with you if you want. And help you to learn how to live in peace with your thoughts. Okay, it's all in the thoughts, nothing else.
Thanks, Ken.
I'd love to hear from some of the men who haven't spoken yet.
Thanks, Ken. I think the artist way will really help, but we can talk about that at the end of the
And
session.
I would like to invite Graham, who hasn't spoken yet. If you're willing to speak, Graham, would you like to say something? Also, just notice that Jeff has joined us.
Yeah,
kind of
first
a
of
little bit.
all, I'd like to hand to Clifford because he's had his hand up for a while. So, yeah. All yours, Cliff.
Thank you, Pete.
I heard that, yes.
And I was going to speak earlier and then withdrew a bit. I've been reflecting why. I think I've heard lots of brains trying to make sense of what's going on in the world. And for me, that isn't the essence of what I need. My brain keeps doing that anyway. Like it's compulsive. Being here, vulnerable and open-hearted is for me the challenge. How do I sit here and show you all how I'm feeling in a way that you can respond to what I get fed by, rather than responding in a way that just pushes me into a box or puts a label on me or tries to fix something. A lot of my pain doesn't need fixing, it just needs space. A lot of my confusion doesn't need somebody else to sort it out for me. You just need space to be worked out. And so I'm trying to find how I can be here and speak in a way which creates that space for me and for others. And I don't have an answer. I don't have this is the technique. I know 1,000 tools, and some of them are really useful in certain moments. But in this moment now, I feel struggle as to how to say, actually, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to care and express that and evoke feeling and hear the response, rather than disappear into the brain or disappear into the generalization than the solution. That's why I want to make a request. If I'm not talking sense to you, you forgive that. And if what I'm saying resonates with you, I'd like to hear how you feel rather than what you think. And that's, yeah, I'd like to just rest it there. And for me also, a silent lack of response is fine. I don't need answers here. I request, a certain quality of space. That's all.
Thank you for your reframing, and I think it's everything you say resonates very much. Graham, I was interested in how you were feeling at the beginning of the session. I felt there was more you were wanting to give.
Thank you. Yes, this mixture of fear and excitement. I wanted to share some thoughts just to participate. I was interested in the idea of doing inner work, where and what Tamara mentioned about sitting with one's thoughts, in deciding not to judge myself. I recognized this morning my self-criticism was about judging myself, and I noticed the feelings and their locations in my body. And I try quite hard to do inner work. I've been trying to master the art of sitting still for a very, very, on and off for years, and it's quite hard because I just want to rush out and do things. Yesterday, I got into a beautiful flow state in the morning doing my Tai Chi, but I just spent a good hour or two deciding what to do. And I decided to cycle for 10 miles across London and back to visit a healing center, the Mahikari Healing Center in Norwood Junction. And on the way back, I got into a beautiful meditative focus state. I've decided to heal my body, but with my mind. I have to sit still and focus on an image an image of what it is to be healed and whole. And oh, I stayed up late last night. I drank 2 bottles of wine and I watched the Together annual general meeting. I watched it through a couple of times and I just loved the certainty, the confidence and the achievement of the speakers. And I was really amazed, actually. I just loved the technical production of that event. So yeah, that was just me chiming in to share some thoughts. I love this idea of the artist's way. You get up, I believe, because I had this book and I gave it away to a friend of mine, but I believe the idea is you just sit down and write for half an hour, or you write 3 pages and you just randomly let a stream of, you know, thoughts flow out across the page. And I did it for a few weeks back when I had the book, and yeah, it was a wonderful practice. I've been sitting here just sketching perspective ideas, but anyway, I'll leave it there for the minute. I was just wanted to join in the conversation and some general verbal riffing. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Yeah, and I would reaffirm that the artist's way has released a lot for me, and in terms of having a practice, that's half the secret for me, is something I sit down and do first thing in the morning, and it does create flow. Conrad, I'm really interested to hear more about your conversations or anything else that's come up for you in this conversation.
Oh, yes. First of all, there's just so much, is there not? Everything from industrial revolutions to wars to how things have happened. I started off, before we came on, thinking about the fear we men have towards the feminine, and remembering my first date and how nervous I was going up to the young woman's front door where her parents also lived and asking her out, and how much fear is in that, and in myself as a male, who at the same time wants to be a warrior, not a warrior necessarily just to wield a sword, but to step up, because this has been one of my personal struggles. I mentioned the word cowardice, and you picked up on that, Pete. And I've been thinking of myself as a coward for quite some time, since pretty much the beginning of this whole debacle. When I discovered that there was going to be a 5G mast put in a field just 250 meters up the road from my woodland where I live, I told a few people about it, and a friend of mine, Andrea, she said, okay, let's go and put some flyers around Marlborough and talk to people and things like that. And I found it really difficult. I was really quite frightened of doing that. And I kept saying, come on, you're a man, you can step up, you can be a warrior. So that's been my own personal struggle. And in the process of saying it's time to step up, a lot of my local friends have enjoyed my stories of my life living on sailing boats. I spent 40 years living on small sailing craft. Well, actually more than 40 years, both as a professional sailor. I professionally skippered yachts for rich people, and I had my own. And there was one particular 20-year period where I lived on a 33-foot sloop on the east coast of the United States. And there are many stories that come out of that. And from those stories, I have recognized the beauty and wonderment of life on this planet. Graham remembers a story I told him at Camp Out of drifting up the Cooper. He even made a small video about it. And
It's on YouTube, by the way. I'm going to share the link somewhere. I'll put it in the chat on the other.
Oh, okay. So these stories, I've started to link them to the law of our lives. And as I said before, it's L-O-R-E, but remembering also the word L-A-W, which I say is their word, because they refer to law, land, air, and water. In other words, they want to have control over everything. And yet the real law is the incredible magnificence of us as a creature to experience the beauty and, I say, the wonderment of living here on the planet. So by telling the story like drifting up the Cooper River, which is out of Charleston, South Carolina, at 3 o'clock in the morning, when there isn't a breath of wind and only allowing the tide to take me, and discovering that I am actually sailing in the universe, in so much as the stars above are reflected in the black, still water all around me. So I am literally surrounded by stars. This moment is, for me, a recognition of, as I say, the wonderment of life, of being alive, of being this creature, 2 legs, 2 arms, and all the rest of it that we have on this incredible planet. And when I feel that when we touch that wonderment, we are actually in the law of being human. And at the same time, knowing that we have that law that is of natural law, and which I think everybody knows here is to do no harm. I set out at the beginning of my journey to find a simple way, because when I discovered that the legislation has over 9 million pieces of legislation, according to Anna de Buissier, I said, no, that ignorance of the law is no excuse, they say, but I'm not going to learn 9 million pieces of legislation. And finally, I came across natural law, to do no harm. And so my effort is to marry these laws, L-A-W and L-O-R-E, together as a human being living on this magnificent planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Conrad. Simon.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we talked about sort of healing relationships. I found that my work with Tantra has been very helpful in this. We're talking about the spiritual connection between the masculine and the feminine, which I've been working on now for, gosh, it was 18 years since I first started doing it, 19 years. And I found that in that sort of safe space, sharing has been very useful to me. And I think if we talk about doing rugby or doing men's stuff and doing women's stuff, and that thing about if you looked at the original Maria's original talk about the fact she spotted a whole load of women having fun in Greece, but the men seemed grumpy. I think that's polarizing it a bit. I think if we're looking at stuff, let's do stuff together, not separately. That's what I was going to say.
Thanks, Simon. Good to see Jeff has dropped in. Hi, how are you, Jeff? Good to spend time.
Hi, Pete. Very good to see you. I'm very happy to be here. Having some tech issues, as usual. Glad to be here. I concur with the last comment about doing it together. As someone who does a lot of events around men and women, holding circles and doing sweat lodges, and then bringing the men and women together, usually in nature, that for me has been a journey that has really given a lot to me. And I very strongly feel that the artist's way is a good methodology for any of us, men and women. And that being in nature and allowing that to speak to us, particularly as men at the moment in this very machine world, is very necessary. Being on that retreat in the Rapia recently with the nature was amazing. And being with a group of women was interesting. As you know, Pete, you and I were the only men, and I think there was 10 or 9 or 10 other women on it, which has a certain dynamic, which can be challenging at times for me. As much as I love and got to know the women on the group, individuals. And it's this thing where women seem to just be able to just get on with it. Whereas as men, we seem to appear, myself included, to be thinking things through, perhaps not comfortable with suddenly just speaking up. There's a few things I noticed which I must share that I particularly found it difficult when there's alcohol involved. And that sometimes there's discussions about men's stuff that women were having, and I wasn't able to speak up. And I do sense, and for all the right reasons, historically, there are many tropes around. Men used to put women down, probably still do, and say things about women that were derogatory, about their minds or about their bodies. And this, to me, seems the reversal of that. I live in Glastonbury. There's a very strong, you might say, goddess emergence culture there, which is great at some levels. But I have called female friends out with these tropes where they say things about men that are quite disparaging. It rolls off the tongue. These are intelligent women. And I have to say, look, enough's enough. You know, it's not about treating us men like women have been treated for a long time. I know some of this may have been aired in the group in the last hour, because I don't know what it was. So my personal journey at the moment is that, as I said to Pete recently, I describe myself as a heterosexual man, but queer by philosophy. And what I mean by that is that I've always felt something of an outsider culturally, but have found the others, have found my family. So I don't feel really an outsider these days as a man in my 60s. But I'm aware of what I call, when I say queer, I mean a range of cultural experiences which aren't necessarily to do with sexuality, but sometimes that's part of it, but are around philosophy, about rigidity and social structures about men and women. And I feel that the best thing that men can do is get together in circles and talk things through, do dynamic, systematic work like sweat lodges, and really tune in, as I can't remember your name, I'm sorry, that you talked about stillness and silence in the inner journey. That's important. But as men and as women, we need to do dynamic work and feel our dynamism. And I do see a lot of men who've become very undynamic and beaten down. And that, I think, is where there is the point about the grumpy old man thing can come in. Because men are feeling really beaten down, unable to express themselves. It's a minefield. If I talk over people, I can be accused of being abusive or too macho. The same doesn't apply for women. Other languages used could be derogatory about women doing that. But we're not so able to say these things to women at the moment. Or I'll own that. I say I'm not able to say things. Because it feels like there's almost carte blanche for women who almost behave how they feel and chuck their shit around sometimes. Whereas as men, we don't have an outlet for our anger, our frustration, our enmity, negative emotions. And so I wanted to bring that in. And I personally feel quite an empowered man in my life, and pretty dynamic. But inside, there are the inevitable struggles around shame. And I think the fundamental shame that men feel is that we can't protect the women and children or ourselves in this world, this machine world, the corporate world that's eating itself and all of us and all beings. And that, you know, we are in the role of protector. And just one final thing, I really want to move on with the language. Gentleness is not a feminine quality. It's also a masculine quality. Being forthright and outspoken is not just a masculine quality, it's also a feminine quality. These are just two examples at the top of my head, but I think you get the idea that in splitting, the big split means that men are gentle, they're thought to be feminine. I don't agree with that. We can be gentle, powerful warriors and cry the tears of a warrior. And that's okay. More than okay. It's really needed. So yeah, that's just my initial thoughts. Thank you.
Oh, Jeff, I want to respond to that with I would just put a comment in the chat. I travel a lot, and I quite often get offers of help. You know, people see I'm not quite as young as I might be, and they think I might have trouble carrying my bag, so they offer to help. And I say, yes, please, that's lovely, that's very kind. And but this one man approached me on the last trip, I think it was, and he said, "You look very capable, and would you like some help?" And I just found that absolutely perfect. You know, that was just so sweet and beautiful. Yeah, lovely. It was lovely. So I appreciate it when men want to help, you know, that why not? Oh gosh, it's so lovely. And the reciprocal as well. I know. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Tamara. Just wanted to refer briefly, Clifford put in the chat, his view is that he can decrease, ignore, or increase the felt safety for feelings in any situation, including a drop-in call, and experiment with ways of doing that. So I'm particularly interested in the experimenting of different ways of holding these sessions or any other sessions. And I think Jeff's point about ceremony, also relating as well to earlier comments about perhaps some men feeling intimidated by a ceremony or just having to be naked effectively, whether in the sweat lodge literally or whether metaphorically naked in front of other people.
Pete, you've done a lot to make these sessions comfortable. You know, I don't know what that is, but you've done a lot to make these things comfortable.
Thank you, Ken. I was going to ask, there are 2 or 3 members who've really wanted to take part in this discussion. I suggested we could have a quick conversation about whether everyone here would be happy for them to see a recording of this. Is there anyone who wouldn't? I wouldn't want to put it out any wider than that. But a thumbs up generally. Anyone who wants to say no to that?
I think we need another session on this topic. This has been amazing.
Thank you. Couple of people we haven't heard from recently. Jan, anything from your end that's coming up you'd like to say?
Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah.
I just changed devices. Maybe that's a bit better. Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a couple of points that I picked up from other people's comments, and in fact, the reason why I'm here, you know, I'm really drawn to this whole idea of the new masculinity, as Charles Eisenstein has called it a long time ago. So I am involved here in Bath, a little bit of Glastonbury, a little bit of Bath. I am with a men's circle. So we're sitting around a fire once a month and share the kind of stuff that men usually, or at least usually is the wrong word, let's say in our world, in our predominant world at the moment, don't share. And it's amazing. And I think one of the reasons why it works is that there is no women present. No offense here, and I'm, like when I joined this meeting, I was surprised that there's so many women. So there is a lot of hope for us, man. We are supported, but I think there's things, subjects, and dynamics that only happen in certain sort of circles, and without wanting to exclude anyone, it is basically like men are different, or there are aspects. I mean, there's all this Jungian and Freudian. I mean, there's all this protector and things that come up in a man that when a woman is present, that we can leave behind and concentrate on other things, man exclusively. So I think this is really important that we do this work as man, and it is part of our journey, and not just man's journey. But what I wanted to say here is, like, I think the problem that sexism in general represents is basically like the problem we're facing as a civilization and in general. As I mentioned, I went to this water conference, and it reminded me on an expression that I picked up at Medicine Festival in connection with mushrooms. Am I a human? That goes, am I a human with a mushroom experience, or as in this case, with a water experience, or am I water with a human experience? So I think the foundation of all these ideas and concepts and of solving these problems lies with how we understand ourselves, being in this world, being in this body, be it a man or a woman. And I mean, I was looking in my sort of, is it the longest journey by now, in my own spiritual journey for the last 8 or 9 years maybe. And I picked up a lot of, like I worked a lot or read a lot of Buddhist sort of, and Eastern Asian sort of philosophies, aspects, to understand ourselves, that I am you and you am I, and every body and every animal has been my mother at some point. So I am sort of, like, I can't judge anyone from my position, and this idea. So if we start to understand ourselves as other first peoples, cultures have practiced this, and is still around as an idea, as being just part of a whole, and not me and you, and this separation idea, everything else will fall into place. Like me as a man and you as a woman, or me as a woman in a man's experience, and vice versa. It's so this is sort of my general idea here, sort of why I'm really interesting to hear what you have to say. Yeah, that's sort of like the main point I wanted to make, that it is good that we talk, but sometimes we have to talk in certain circumstances that will exclude others, and it is important, or I think it's the foundation, or the foundation of any of the changes, whether it is in this context of masculinity and femininity, or it's in the context of our civilization as such, that we have to sort of begin with the sort of, like, yeah, we call it the inner, maybe the inner work, or simply this understanding, this sort of idea, maybe it is all different than I've been taught for the last 50 something years in my life, and I'm just one of these brain cells in this big brain that is called consciousness. I'm getting to rambling, so I'm going to sort of pass the talking stick on a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah. For me, that recalls, how do we move beyond knee-jerk judgment, and we still have that on some of our sessions with people talking about particular politicians or whatever it is. There's still a lot of instant hatred there as a reaction. How do we move beyond that? And some of the stuff you were talking about very much relates to those moves, I think. Well, we're already 15 minutes over time. I've really been enjoying this conversation. Brian, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, nothing that particularly resonated, but I certainly think it's a good idea just to maybe just extend the session and carry on with the theme. It's just of just bringing things of gender identities. It's of and other stuff. I think we should do this more often, basically.
I agree with Brian. We got to do another session on this. This has been really intense. And it makes me even more want to be there physically with you guys, as very difficult as that's going to be.
Great. I think that's a great feedback. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Ken. Yeah. And Nicola put in the chat, women need their own circles, and likewise men do too. And while Jan was talking, I was thinking, and I've been feeling a lot through the Heraclea week too, that I'd like to be part of a men's circle. So if there's anyone here who'd like to join up and talk about how we might do that.
Where are you?
Well, I'm physically
up by Zoom because I'm so far away from the rest of you.
Yeah, I'm physically on Paros, but much easier to do on Zoom, although that's not as instantly.
No, you need to be in body. You really need to be in body and be able to move around and stamp
and shake pom-poms. Yes.
Somebody's knocking on my door. I've got people coming to collect plants, so I have to say bye. But Jan, I want to keep in touch with you. You said something interesting to me, and thank you, everybody. I've got to run downstairs. Oh, bye.
Take care, Tamara. See you next time.
Thanks, Tamara.
But I would say that I think it is perfectly possible to be embodied online. You can get up and move. You're not fixed to the screen. And even when you're sitting down, you can also be embodied.
Only in your kitchen, I would argue.
Not my kitchen, but
in a kitchen, in my kitchen.
Depends how the cooking is crumbling for you, Poppy.
It's still
I think, yeah, go on.
Did you say? Sorry.
I still think it'd be very different if I was there in person with you guys, as difficult as that is. I mean, some of you know that I've known Pete for almost 40 years from the music community.
So any other concluding?
I think you're right. In person is a much better way. You get so much more out of being face to face, having worked with clients online and face to face. But I just think that anything is better than nothing. That would be what I would say.
Well, I'm very grateful for these Sunday sessions. You know, it's a lifeline for me, and I make sure I get up at this horrible hour to be here with you.
It's still about connection, isn't it?
I can hear you okay. Can you hear me?
Good.
Yeah, we're hearing you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you, everyone. Let's carry on this conversation on the thread on Campfire, and if you'd like to do another session, I'd be more than happy to continue on this sort of theme. It'd be nice to invite Maria. For some reason, she thought it was 2:30, so there may have been a mix-up in the clock. But it'd be good to hear from her. So I'll invite her to another one, possibly next week. So thank you, everyone, for being part of this.
Well, I really am curious, since it really does tie in with the subject matter today, how you all would have reacted had I come in the cheerleader garb for this.
Smoke signals from around the campfire.